Well, the general election is coming up, folks. November 5th is barreling at us like a freight train, and there is so much on the line in these elections when you stop and think about it. If you're pro-gun, if you're pro-Second Amendment, if you're pro-family, pro-life, pro-closed borders, pro not having your vote get watered down by criminal aliens. If you are pro-conservative America, you're going to want to watch this video, folks. I'm Chris Dorr. I'm the director for Pennsylvania Firearms Association, and your House District 144 right there in Bucks County is one of the most important elections that are happening in the entire state of Pennsylvania in this election cycle, because whoever wins this race, likely that party is going to control the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Currently, the Democrats control it. They are very eager to control it again. In fact, they're trying to expand that lead by flipping the Pennsylvania Senate. And if they do that, they'll have a Democrat trifecta, and the Democrat anti-gun agenda will be the only one going forward. In this video, I'm going to talk about the two candidates who are running to represent you for the next 2 years. We're going to first talk about the incumbent Democrat, Brian Munroe. Then we're going to switch over and talk about Dan McPhillips for just a few seconds, so that you guys can make a better decision about who you want representing you at the Capitol in Harrisburg. So with that, I've got my little pencil color here, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to bring up my red pen because we've got some bad things we need to go over about Brian Munroe. First and foremost, this guy is endorsed by Ceasefire PA. Well, that gives him a red X. Ceasefire PA is a gun control organization, and they are very much advocating for the disarmament policies of the 1940s Europe, like in Germany or Italy, or even over in Japan, obviously, which is not in Europe. But they want the total elimination of private firearms ownership. I've been at committee meeting after committee meeting where they bring in testifiers that testify that you and I should have our guns taken away from you because of the actions of gangbangers and street thugs that are participating in gang violence in these big cities. And Ceasefire PA is a terrible organization, and Brian Munroe is endorsed by them. And I think I know why. Here's a couple of reasons why. Brian Munroe voted for red flag gun confiscation as a state representative. I don't know why that's missing the T on that gun confiscation there. Here, we'll put a T in there. He voted for red flag gun confiscation as a state representative. And here's what this bill does. It simply gives anyone the ability to petition a judge to have your guns taken away from you without you ever being charged, tried, or convicted of a crime. Total destruction of due process rights for gun owners. And get this. When they go to that judge, they can say they can enter as evidence the fact that you recently acquired a firearm as a reason why you should have your firearms taken away from you. Brian Munroe voted so that if you exercise your Second Amendment rights, that's justification to take those rights away. Unbelievable. Brian Munroe voted for that. He also voted for universal gun registration. Universal gun registration is the foundation, the cornerstone of gun confiscation. And that's not, I'm not the first person to sit here and say that. Joe Biden says it. Kamala Harris says it. Beto O'Rourke, when the Democrats used to hold primaries to figure out who the Democrat nominee was going to be, he said it right there on the national debate stage. Hell yes, we're going to take away your guns. The gun confiscation agenda, Kamala Harris is saying it today, ban AR-15s. That whole agenda is predicated upon universal gun registration. They need to know who owns what firearms. Brian Munroe voted for that. I got to put red X's by these. Brian Munroe voted for that as a current sitting state representative. Taking away guns from good people will not stop violent criminals from committing heinous acts of violence with the firearms that they will go and purchase regardless of whatever the laws are. Brian Munroe knows it. He knows that these things only affect the law-abiding citizen, and yet he continues to vote for it. He supports a total ban on AR-15s. He doesn't support just that. He wants to ban all semi-automatic firearms like Ruger 1022s, little 1022 rifles, Marlin Model 60s. He wants to ban Glock 19s, the firearm that so many thousands of Pennsylvania women carry every day to defend themselves and their kids against violent attackers, Brian Munroe wants to ban those. Wants to ban stuff like a Remington 1187 12-gauge shotguns that people use to go hunting. This stuff is insane. None of this stuff, none of these gun control laws will ever stop a single killer. None of these proposals will make any streets safer. If they did, all of these gun control laws are already on the books in places like Chicago. People would take their families there for summer vacation instead of Pennsylvania. But they don't, because gun control doesn't work. But there's Brian Munroe voting for it every single time. He supports mandatory gun lockups. They call this safe storage laws. But folks, I'm here to tell you that's a totally fake name for it. It does not do that. Here's what it does. Kamala Harris said this on video. She said that safe storage laws, mandatory gun lockups, give the state the power to invade the sanctity of your home. This is her words, not mine. Invade the sanctity of your home and inspect your guns to make sure that you're storing them in a manner that they deem safe. This is the same government that left weapons of war on the streets of Afghanistan, military weapons. This is the same party that sold machine guns to the Mexican drug cartels. These are objective facts that you can Google yourselves. And yet here they think they're going to come into your home and invade the privacy of your home and do these things. It's a total violation of your constitutional right to be safe from unreasonable searches and seizures. They're willing to violate the Constitution with these kinds of things. Mandatory gun buybacks. Violent criminals don't come in to these mandatory gun buybacks and say, okay, yeah, fine, here you go. I was going to go murder somebody, but I guess not. You're going to buy it back from me. They don't do that. None of these things that Brian Munroe supports and votes for work. They never have, they never will, because the motivating factor for a violent criminal is the evil in their hearts. Period. End of story. I don't like that as much as anybody else. But gun control doesn't stop any of that. What it does is it punishes the law abiding. So you combine all of these things together here, and honestly, Brian Munroe earns a big old F for his voting record and his support for this gun control. This kind of stuff is not American, and it doesn't save anybody's life. Let's talk about Dan McPhillips here for just a second, because he's the Republican running to challenge Brian Munroe here. The simple fact of the matter is that when it comes to Dan McPhillips, we don't know much. I looked all through his campaign website. I looked all through his social media accounts. I did keyword searches for the Second Amendment. I didn't find any references to that. That's cause for concern. But here's the deal: if the Republican Party controls the chamber, the House of Representatives in Harrisburg, that means people like that means more pro-gun people will be controlling the committee process, and thus stopping gun control bills from making it to the House floor. So presumably, if Dan Phillips makes it into office, he'd vote for somebody that's not nearly as. Don't forget, Brian Munroe voted for Joanna McClinton. She's the most anti-gun legislator that's ever walked the halls of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Go on YouTube Joanna McClinton, some of the stuff that she's said about gun control. It's absolutely shocking. And Brian Munroe voted for her for Speaker of the House. So this is where these candidates are. I wish I had more concrete facts to talk to you about Dan McPhillips about. But we have loads of information about Brian Munroe. This guy is fully committed to outlawing the private ownership of firearms in America. He's got the voting history to prove it, to back it up. He's earned that F rating that we just gave him now. And this is a huge cause for concern if you're a gun voter who lives in House District 144. So want to get this information out there to you. There's a lot on the line in these elections. If you see Dan McPhillips on the campaign trail, ask him about his stance on the Second Amendment. If you see Brian Munroe on the campaign trail, tell him this is not 1940s Germany or Italy or Japan. This is America. This is Pennsylvania. This is the birthplace of freedom. And we're not going to follow down that road of old tyranny. That stuff has been tried before. It's never worked out well. And in the 20th century alone, an estimated 45 million people at a minimum were genocided by their own governments. They can't do that to America. They can't do that to Pennsylvania as long as we own our firearms. Violent criminals are bad. Criminal governments are far worse. It's happened many times in history. It could happen again. That's what the Second Amendment is all about. So, folks, please share this video with everybody you know, your pro-gun friends, family, loved ones, neighbors, co-workers, church family members. Make sure they know the difference between these two candidates. If you see Brian Munroe on the campaign trail, again, remind him that stuff doesn't go here. This is Pennsylvania, not Germany. And last but not least, on November 5, it's a lot at stake. I'm asking you folks to round up your friends, your pro-gun friends, head down to the polls, and vote pro-gun.